That's what you do. You buy these players that cost me and make a difference in it. But we never do that.
Never complains, gets up, gets on, with a smile on his face.
You just want you to sit in your chair and go, hip hip hooray, for the Western press and the Western narrative, regurgitating the same old, every single day, without the sun. If you haven't seen it before, please watch the first two episodes, the second season.
We are on the site of the castle,
and it was the first time the Beatles had really stopped being semi-professional almost.
Look at that.
Absolutely fascinating.
Hello everyone, it's me again, as usual, and I'm sorry I'm a little bit late, that's all, just a little bit. Just have to get a few things done, before. I got a phone call, to be honest, and it was the usual about Liverpool, FC, that is, and I said, Mo Salah and Virgil are signing, possibly Trent. So, but that's for tomorrow night. Tonight is about history. Tonight is about this great city of ours. That's what it's all about. And someone asked me, they said, who's your favourite, Frank, was it? There's a few streets, I can't find the origins of them. So I said, okay, I got a phone call, when was it? Anyway, I got this phone call, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So I wrote them down. I said, yeah, what do you want to do? What streets do you want? And I wrote them down. I'll talk about that a bit later. But tonight's show, there's a mishmash of history. What I mean by a mishmash is that I want to talk about the Civil War and the impact of that. But also, I want to talk about, which is, as I said, a mishmash of history, just things that come to the mind and just talk about them. But in the future, I'd love you to ask, a question. Hey, Frank, what about, and see if I can answer it. If I can't answer it, what I mean? But just, as I said, just ask and see what happens. But that not now, not tonight. I haven't woken up properly yet. Anyway, I'll talk about some wonderful things tonight, especially about the Civil War and its impact on Liverpool. To be honest, what was it all about? Could surprise you. Then again, I might surprise you, because most probably you already know. See what I mean? So before I bring my best mate on, best ever mate in the world, I just want to say to these wonderful Gap Patent Services, who are the sponsors of the Frank Carlyle show. Every one of them, to be honest, they're really good, and they sponsor me. They sponsor this. It's not that I get money or The likes of Jason, it's just to keep this running, because it does cost money, believe it or not. We have to pay things out. Well, I don't, Jason's also having a clue what has to be paid out. So, got patent services. And I tell you what, they are the first class. Honestly, I got them in. They weren't sponsoring they weren't sponsoring this. I didn't know who they were, and I can't do any painting anymore. Can't do anything, to be honest. But anyway, I got them in, nevertheless. Someone gave me the phone number. Said, ring these people up, Frank. So I said, okay. So I rang them up. He came in. And I'll tell you what, they did a fantastic job. They really did. These lads are all fully time served. You know, they were apprentices, then they came into full time after an apprenticeship. And that's who these lads are. Fantastic painters and decorators. And as I said, they came in, didn't mind. They were in and out. They had to move things as well. You know, they had to move things, and there was no problem to them. They just moved it, painted, put it back, and shook hands, said thanks very much, paid them, and it was dead reasonable. It really was. So these lads got painting services. If you're an NHS worker, don't struggle, please don't struggle. Get them in. You get a special discount. Not only do you get a special discount, but you also get a great job well done. Honestly, they do it. You'll be quite surprised. And if you're an elderly person, like Anthony, my best mate, what a joke. Kick me at it. Especially Laney as well. Hey. But anyway, you know, if you get them in, don't struggle, please, and you get a special discount. The elderly, and even if you're not in those categories, as I keep saying, they're dead reasonable. Honestly, that's Gap Painting Services, the sponsors of the Frank Carlyle show. As I said, they're all brilliant lads, honestly. One of them made me a cup of tea as well. I said, do you fancy a cup of tea? He said, yeah, I sit there, you're all right. And he made me a cup of tea, along with himself and a couple of others, you know. Great. So anyway, that's the wonderful Gap Painting Services. And I'm going to bring in, I'll just read a couple of these out. And it's Paul Sarah. Good evening, Frank. Hope you're okay today. Just visited Liverpool Cathedral today. What an amazing building. So much history. Yeah. Is that the one? Is that the Gothic one? The Anglican. And I told these Americans, I was forced to bring these Americans around. I said, I don't want to take them around. I'll take them around with me. So we had to. And one of the fellas, if you'd ever see Faulty Towers, where that big American is, a big obnoxious American, asking for a Waldorf salad. This fella was like big obnoxious. We've got better things and bigger things and all this. And anyway, I was walking over, going up Lacey Street, and I looked up and I went, see that? And they all went, wow. All the cobblestones, you know, I love that street. Cobblestones, looking at the top of the is the Anglican. They're all made up. And I said, well, tomorrow, I said, but all the workers are up there now. I said, but tomorrow they're going to demolish. This Waldorf fella said, yes, that's Frank for you. Oh, anyway, tell him the greatest cop out. He says, Salah and Virgil are staying. Yeah. And Daryl says, no war chest. Fact. Fact, Frank Carlyle. Oh, man. And Paul says, the largest cathedral in the UK and the highest in the world, Frank, from our great city. Yeah. Point is, it was the last massive Gothic building to be built as well in the world. But it's not the biggest. It's not the biggest. The biggest cathedral is the Vatican. No other cathedral, no matter what denomination, can be bigger than the Vatican. That's an absolute factor. And even before he comes on, tell, evening, Anthony. And on that wonderful note is me Oppo, Anthony Brown, the great, and I'm talking about the great artist. One of our, you're talking about the cathedral there. Honestly, you're talking about the cathedral and the talents we have, and I mean talents with a plural. This fella is up there with the best. And I'm talking about artists. I'm talking about artists. One of the greatest, honestly. And there he is, me little Oppo, Anthony. Hello, Anthony.
Good evening, Francesco. Good evening, Daryl. Thank you so much. And good evening, all, one and all. And including
isn't it great, Anthony, the way people, talk about the city and, like as Paul Turner said, he visited the Anglican Cathedral and saying what a fantastic thing that is. I did a DVD there.
Yeah.
And it's quite incredible. It really is.
It's amazing. Whenever we've been in, and we've been in there to officially do some work and stuff. Whenever we go, Laney and I went in there the other month. It is one of those buildings that you just stop. Wherever you are in it, you stop gobsmacked at what's there. Just
it is. It's one of the most visited buildings in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's all because. And do you know what, Anthony? I'm Paul Turner. What it is that that wasn't the original site. It wasn't the original site. You know the way you get sites and say, well, yeah, we'll put it there. That wasn't the original site. And also, even for the Catholic Cathedral, that wasn't the original site for the Catholic Cathedral. So they had to change. They said, well, we can't put the original sites. They said, well, we can't put them there. They were told you can't put them there. There's things going to go happening, if you know what I mean. It's already earmarked for something different. So they said, okay. And unbeknown to them, they chose the sites they're on now. And I'm talking about unbeknown to each other. They chose the sites. And that's why we've got the only one in the world, in the entire world, two cathedrals at the end of a street called Hope.
Absolutely right, Frank. You could not, you could not plan that. And in the middle of those two magnificent cathedrals is one of the most famous theatres. And we love the area, the Georgian Quarter, but the Philharmonic Theatre is just fantastic, and that marks almost the halfway point between yeah.
Then you have the Philharmonic pub.
That what a glorious pub that is. I am so glad that nothing touched that over the years. you know. And it's hard to imagine now that pub was so popular even before we were born.
Oh yeah,
But
oh yeah.
I mean, that has been phenomenal, that built and is now. I remember someone warning me years ago, the late 80s, early 90s, said, watch it when you go to Gents Lou. I said, what do you mean? He said, because the tourists go in there. I thought they were joking. But when you go in, the building itself, the attention to detail is just phenomenal. And when you're in this listed loo, people do wander in with cameras. Excuse me, mate, I'm just...
Do you know what though as well? Which, you know, you're talking about the toilets there, is that it's the most photographed toilet in the country.
Yeah,
It's just photographed, and you're right, you know, because people do just women. I had, you know, when I used to take some people out, and used to go in there if I was doing the two cathedrals and Hope Street itself,
yeah,
and I used to go in there, and women women honestly, you know, just walked in because you
yeah,
know other people said, "Oh, I'm taking a great photo and whatever." And they just walked in. Some two fellas were having a pee,
yeah.
and he come down the back house. You know, and that's the way it is. That is the way it is.
Brilliant, brilliant pub all round. I love the snugs. I love the whole thing. It's almost timeless.
Oh yeah.
And then sit down with a pot of tea or a couple of beers, and it's like could be any time.
Well, that's it. You know, it's one of those things. And strangely enough, you know, talking about Hope Street, how did it get its name? You know, someone asked. As I said, I don't know, sit down, you know, what you want Hope Street. Well, anyway. And he said, "Can you put it out over the air?" I said, "What do you mean?" Because I told him.
Yeah,
You know, when he said, "How did it get its name?" And I told him. And he said, "Can you say it on the stream?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And now I don't know whether this fella, because it's not one of these lads here. I don't know. And he said, "I'm watching, you know, Frank." I said, "Oh, God, you know." But I didn't say, like, will you subscribe or will you press a like or anything? And I didn't know the lad, you know. He said, "I'm sorry, I got your phone number off somebody, if you don't mind." I carried on. So anyway, I said, "Okay, yeah, no problem." And that's when he said, "You know, would you there?" I said, "Yeah." And who it's named after, where the Philharmonic pub is now, on that particular site was a fellow by the name of William Hope, and it was the very first home built, and it's on the site of the Philharmonic pub.
okay.
But he wasn't an ordinary, like, you know, merchant or whatever. He was a miller, and a miller in those days, like today, strangely enough, is a very important person because
Yeah,
he milled the grain, and you know you get the flour and whatever. So it's named after him, a fellow
wow,
by the name of William Hope.
wow.
It's you
Isn't
know,
that
go
such
on.
such a remarkable thing that, yeah, I don't take anything away from the gentleman, but what what a phenomenal name for a road, a street. I
Hope
couldn't call it a street. It's an area that houses two of the greatest cathedrals this country has got.
I love the Catholic cathedral as well.
Me too.
Do you know what? People, you know, they look at the you know the Liverpool Anglican and go, "Wow, look at that! It's
Yeah,
Gothic."
yeah,
And when you go to the opposite side of Rodney Street, the other end of it, you've got the Catholic Cathedral, which
yeah,
is ultra modern.
yeah.
And when you look at the architects, one who built the Catholic cathedral was from another. What he was he was a non-Catholic. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Right, and the architect of the Gothic cathedral was a Catholic.
Yeah.
And this is where you get them combined. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And it didn't, religion didn't matter.
No.
No matter who they were.
No.
No matter who they were. Religion didn't matter.
Should it, Frank? It shouldn't obliterate one. Who's a greater God? You know, that shouldn't come in. But
No.
I totally agree with it. It's different. You know, it's not Gothic, but it is the most amazing experience to walk in to the cathedral when the sun hits those windows. Isn't it the same windows? Oh, wow.
Well, that's you know, like the Anglican was designed by Sir Giles Scott, and he was Catholic.
Yeah.
And as I said, religion did, you know, you didn't have to be a like Protestant or whatever, Anglican or whatever they are, you know, to build. He just won a competition.
I know.
He just won a competition, and they built it the same as Sir Frederick Gibbet, the non-Catholic who built the Catholic cathedral. And the Catholic cathedral is built on Oscar Niemeyer's, one of the greatest architects in the world. He was Brazilian, and he built a rounded cathedral in the capital, you know, Brazil's capital, which is Brasilia.
Yeah.
You know, people think that it's São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. It's not. It's Brasilia. And Gibbet, you know, he'd actually been there, he'd seen it, and he said to himself, if I ever get a commission to build one of these, he said, I'm going to do it. If you like it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he showed the plans when he was commissioned, and he said, yeah, that'll do us, build it. So we've got two unique cathedrals in the world, by the way, in the world. I just want to say hello to some of the people here, Anthony, I hope you don't mind. Tony LFC, the most famous mince pie man in the world. And evening, Frankie. Hello, Anthony. Thanks for me, and Scott for you.
Thanks for them.
And Daryl says, hey, Anthony, lad. Daryl. And Paul Turner says, I'm getting there, thank you. Oh, they're talking to one another, sorry. Sorry there, boys, that's private. And Paul says, I was blown away by the architecture inside the cathedral, especially. Yes, even when you go into as I said, the films inside there, Tony Snell and myself, it's on a DVD, and we were amazed as well.
Yeah.
We couldn't film everything, but we filmed the important parts, put it that way. We actually filmed. And what we filmed, if you ever watch it, it's a window, as you mentioned, about that wonderful, different windows throughout the cathedral, different everything. And on one of them, it was great because these glazes, or whatever they're called, they were there and they were coming down, and what he was looking at was the ladder building. and he used the Liver building as a template, you know, for his stained glass window. And
Yeah.
you just see it. It's fantastic. We pointed it out. It's not a big, huge thing, but he just used it as a template, the Liver building, and that's in one of the windows of the Anglican Cathedral.
Amazing. Just
See, these stained glass windows, they're absolutely brilliant. What they think, what these, you know, people who do these windows think.
yeah,
Because when you've got the Catholic Cathedral as well, I point out to people that they have done in the past, even Rita Tushingham, you know, that wonderful actress,
yeah, yeah,
because someone said, go over to him. That's to me. Because I had a group of people in there and I was just talking to someone, and she came over and she said, hello, one of the guys said to come to you because you just tell me a couple of things about you. I said, yeah, of course. It's a lovely looking girl,
yeah,
lovely looking lady. And I said, yeah. So I told her. And when I pointed out around, you know, the stained glass, I said, look, I said, where you've got the blue there, that's the heavens. And where you've got the splashes of red, and she said, yeah. I said, that's the blood of Christ. And she looked. So I said, hey, I'll just stand there. So I stood back. I said, there, over the altar in the middle, you've got that round thing, haven't you? I said, well, that's the crown of thorns. And once they were placed on his head, they're the splashes of blood. And she was amazed. She said, I was looking at, you know, that before, and I just thought it was lovely, beautiful, the blue and the red. I had no idea until you just explained. She said, thank you. I showed her there Sean Rice's Stations of the Cross, and I showed her one particular one, which I think it's the best piece of sculpture I've ever seen. I'll tell you for why. As you're looking up, you see the Christ on the floor where the cross is so heavy, and he falls. And we all know about the Stations of the Cross. And he falls and he picks himself up, and you see the sinews and everything as he's trying to be, you know, pick the cross and strain his back. You see him, and you can actually see the strain on him. But the most remarkable thing as you're looking at this is you're looking up, but you're also looking down. It's incredible, if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah,
I know it's a juxtaposition, you know, between up and down, but you're actually looking up, but you're also looking down at him.
yeah,
It's a fantastic piece.
yeah. Two perspectives,
Beautiful.
just beautiful. I love it.
It's like everything else, even in the Anglican, you know, the Whispering Gallery, absolutely amazing.
Yes.
And lots of proposals, by the way, in that particular place. You know, the Whispering Gallery. You know, you get one sitting at one and the opposite, if you know what I mean. And
Oh,
it's a couple, you know, loads of said, will you marry me? You know, whispering, will you marry me? Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Don't think they whisper, yeah, okay. You know, so it's just wonderful, wonderful pieces of history
Yes.
to me.
It's an adventure.
Yeah,
You can't
yeah.
just go in there, walk one door, walk out the other. It takes your heart and soul first.
Oh yeah, I've never heard of this chap. Marcus Marr. Oh yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant films.
Marcus was on last week with us. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
And as he says, the Phil's toilets are simply regal. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
You just say anti-great and he comes out and says regal. See, people have words, don't they, for certain words for their
Yeah.
things. Oh, absolutely.
And they are. Yeah. It's beautiful.
And truly 19th century decor. Yes.
Totally
Yes.
agree, Marcus.
That's a cracker, isn't it? And he got his on by saying, I lived in Brasilia, Frank, and Nehemiah was the son of German immigrants. He's well received there. Thank you so much, Marcus, for that.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Now, he's given me, a little bit of information about the great Oscar Nehemiah.
Yeah.
It just shows you, doesn't it? It just shows you how, I love this. I love these people. I really do because they're so knowledgeable themselves,
Yeah.
and they love our history. They love their city's history.
Well, what it underlines as well is something that we talked about for a long, long time. The idea of an immigrants, which is
Yeah,
used, weaponized against people. They they have produced a different mindset, a different country background, produces some of the most majestic work in the world, whether it be architecture, art, music, football. No,
yeah. And
it's
this is the beauty of our city.
yes,
We've got everything. People don't realise. I'm not talking about us Scousers here, even the likes of Marcus. I'm not talking. I'm talking about people from outside Liverpool who haven't a clue what we've given to the world, not just a nation, but the world. And true to myself, I've always tried to, how can I put this, express what we've given in an articulate way to people who have come into contact with. As I said about, that wonderful Rita Tushingham, she's a Scouser.
yeah,
She just a little bit of information about the splashes, of the Christ,
yeah,
and and the crown of thorns, and I said, they're the crown of thorns, which is over at the altar. And she was just amazed. And the stations of the cross, just those little few. And then we went down into the basement. And I said, that's where I did my exams,
yeah,
Liverpool University. And I
yeah,
was showing sunburst, brickwork and everything. Absolutely amazing. Amazing. The brick. When you're down in the basement, and that was Leutchens' basement because he was building the biggest, and I mean the biggest cathedral in the world at the time, Leutchens.
yeah.
And he went, you can't have that. You can't have that, which is incredible.
So yeah.
It's great
Oh,
Jason.
there's the loo.
Yeah. And there's me having a pee there just out of shot.
Yeah,
You can imagine those women who are in though. They came running back out. That's it. But they went in afterwards, those two lads came out, two fellas.
yeah,
We took pictures, and they're the pictures that. It's incredible, isn't it, really, when you
yeah.
come to think of it. And the same architect, he actually designed the big house, the vines.
I read that. Yeah, I read that a while ago, and how remarkable is that as well?
Yeah, Samuel Thomas. And he also On the opposite end, the Crown. And when
Wow.
you look at the architecture inside, we're astonished at the likes of those toilets in the film, and also great great woodwork throughout
Yeah.
the film as well. You can't like just ignore them.
To
The
see,
art, the woodwork, but
yeah.
also you've got the likes of Samuel Thomas and the vines, incredible,
Yeah.
and also the Crown. When you go to the Crown, if anyone out there listening in, have a look at the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's incredible. The plasterwork is unbelievable.
Takes your breath away.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does take your breath away. Lynn Ellis, evening Frank and Anthony. Hope you are both well. Yes, thank you, Lynn.
And Lynn,
Thank you, Lynn.
too.
And Paul Turner, the Art Deco on the windows is amazing. That's he's talking about. Now Paul's talking about the Philharmonic Hall.
Yeah.
And yes, because Herbert J. Rouse was the architect, and he's my favourite Art Deco architect in the entire world. When you see his work, it's a remarkable, and I love his work. And what got me, we've gone on, haven't we, about buildings being knocked down, and for what? For nothing. And it was beautiful, this, Anthony, and I mean beautiful. Do you know the black granite building next to the Port of Liverpool, which I don't like, by the way?
Yeah.
I don't like those black granite buildings.
Yeah.
Built in the wrong place. Could have built them anywhere else. Anyway,
Yeah.
what they knocked down, Anthony, you might remember them, you mightn't. And they were Herbert J. Rouse's buildings, beautiful Art Deco buildings on a smaller scale than he normally builds. And one of them was a Jaguar place. You sold these Jaguar cars. It was extraordinary building. And they pulled them down.
Yeah.
For that black granite thing.
I remember
Right
them.
on the Strand, right on the Strand.
Yeah.
And I thought, why?
Yeah.
But that's the way it goes, unfortunately.
You got me feeling very guilty now because we were in there. I was in there painting in the black buildings, I did exhibit some work, went to the original warehouse there in the 90s, but then we found a home in the black building.
Yeah.
I was there for like 10 years because nothing was going on with it. And then as happens with property, investment cartels, buyouts, and
Well, I was down there, wasn't I? With Billy Kinsley at your gaff.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Billy.
You kindly brought a gang in one day. Like today you came in. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you see, it's a matter of buildings have to be utilised. No matter what's gone on in the past, like the site of the past. So the black granite, and you used it as a massive studio, and some of the greatest paintings that you've done, some of the greatest, were on display there. And you can't take away anything for the exhibition that you've shown in there. in there on the pierhead in that particular building, and it was ground floor as well. Fantastic.
You know what, Frank? I loved being there on the Thursday. That is that the prototype for the cathedral?
Yeah, that's Edward Lutyens'. And it was funny, actually, because Lutyens, what it was, he showed this, and the Pope, I think it was Pope Pius the 12th, I'm not quite so sure, one of the popes. And he went like that, he said, "Get that fella over here." The Lutyens. So
Wow.
Lutyens had to go to Rome, to the Vatican. And seeing the Pope, he said, nobody can have a cathedral built bigger than, this cathedral. And he said, okay. Lutyens said, okay, no problem. So we went back because he wanted, as I said, he wanted to build the biggest cathedral in the world. And he went back and he scaled it down, and it would have been the biggest or second biggest cathedral in the world, that thing. And if you can see that middle arch, it'll give you some idea how big this is going to be. Do you know the clock tower on Brownlow Hill University, the university clock tower?
Yeah.
That was just slotted in there. So that's how big that was.
Wow.
Huge.
And
it would have been bigger than the Anglican. But could you imagine the both of them at each end? But it doesn't matter, because I think Gibbett's cathedral super, and it goes hand in hand, in my opinion, with like Gothic and modernism. They don't clash. They're there because of their beauty. Yeah, look at that. That's how big it would have been.
Oh my word.
Incredible. Absolutely amazing. And I'm not going to say why it wasn't built. I'm not going to say, because it's very controversial. Very. So I won't say it. I don't mind saying controversial things about America and everywhere else, I don't mind doing that. But I'm not going to say why that wasn't built. It's unfair to people. But isn't that unbelievable what Jason threw up?
Yes.
That's how big it was going to be.
That's
You've got the library, you've got everything else there right in front. You've got the Port of Liverpool built, just the size of it, sheer size of it.
Just how majestic is that?
It is, lovely word, lovely terminology, majestic. Majestic.
And it's kind of like saying to Leonardo da Vinci, I love that Mona Lisa there, but can you make her hair yellow and make her dress blue and do that? You don't interfere with something that amazing.
No, you don't. Amazing if you said that.
Smaller, make it a bit square, make it just...
I just look at things. I'm not saying I take things with a pinch of salt or anything like that, but I look at things, and when you look at art, for example, well, you're a bloody artist, to be honest. And when I look at art, things have got to catch my eye. Now you know that I don't like Picasso.
Yeah,
you know that. I'm sorry to say that, because people love Picasso, but I can't see anything in that. And I like art, the artists. The likes of Constable, for example. Love his work.
Yeah.
And Turner. They bring out colour. They bring out mystery. Especially Turner. He brings out mystery within his
Turner.
artwork, and that's what I love.
Yeah.
That's what. And who's my favourite artist besides yourself in the world is Leonardo
Yeah.
da Vinci.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm made.
Me too. And I think what you're describing is what we're also talking about. It's art like the architecture. When you stand in the middle of our beautiful Anglican cathedral or metropolitan cathedral, the first thing that comes to mind is wow.
Yeah,
And the
wow,
same thing applies to when you see a piece of work which moves you emotionally. And there's a whole thing about art, and people would say, "Oh, well, I don't understand abstract art. I don't understand." It's not about. We unfortunately we get bogged down with learned people who tell us what to think, but they miss the point, because
yeah.
that point where you say, "Wow, that's it, job done."
It
That's
is. It
that's
is. You put it so good there. It's it's how everybody's got a different eye. I
yeah,
mean, they've got a different eye to everything. It's like it's like it's like marrying someone.
yeah,
People go, God blimey. What did you marry him for?
yeah,
Something like that. To a girl and fella. So what did you marry her for? It's things like that, but they don't realise
yeah,
it's what's in the
yeah.
eye of the beholder, as they say. And the
It,
black and white boy, he says, "Evening, gentlemen, and chat."
oh, good evening.
And Gary the Rigby says, "Evening, Frank and everyone." Now, he goes on to say, "I've seen Lucian's architecture in Delhi. Impressive." Well, do you know when you see Delhi, you see a massive arch, and it's got India on. It's right in the middle, and nothing besides. It's just this massive arch, like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and just standing there on its own. You can go to the Forum in Rome. You see a massive arch,
Yeah,
and it's incredible. And the Indian arch in India and Delhi, it's massive. Nothing besides it, not the front of it, the back of it, or anything. It's just there. And Lutyens designed that. Sir Edward Lutyens. Fantastic. I just love, that I love architecture. I'm going to show you something what Jason's just want to say hello to. Well, Paul says, sorry if this is a strange question, Frank, but what is the difference between a cathedral and a church? Well, a cathedral represents the flock, all of it. A church represents a parish, if that makes sense. The cathedral represents all the flock of Christians, if you know what I mean, to their denomination. And a church represents a parish. Because we lived in parishes, didn't we, Anthony?
yeah,
Different parishes, So a church represents that parish.
yeah.
That's a cracking question, Paul. Thank you very much. I hope I've answered it. I hope I've answered it correctly. Look at that.
Oh,
Now that's Luytjen's Cathedral, and there's the Anglican there.
Wow.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But could you imagine that there and the big Gothic one as well?
Yeah,
Oh,
I could, Frank. That's the beautiful thing about it, isn't it? I could, and I'm sure everyone else could as well. That was
and isn't it like, I'm not saying coincidental or anything, but I think it's just unique the way that both sites of both cathedrals went the proper sites. Yet they could have been miles apart from each other, miles. And yet, then they said, no, you can't build there.
yeah,
And they decided, oh, build there, build there, build there. And it's on the same street, Hope Street. And what a name, Hope, for these two magnificent buildings.
just beautiful. But what is also beautiful about that picture, Frank, that image, is that we're looking at those beautiful buildings which overlook the heart of Liverpool, the
Yes.
river, and there's the river doing its business.
Yeah.
Ships come and go.
Absolutely, that's the River Mersey. And people always ask, what is mercy? And I always tell, I've said it loads of times, I think, on here. And I said, well, the Mersey is mercy in language, going back in time. And all it means is boundary. But it's a boundary between Liverpool and the likes of the Wirral, the Birkenhead and Seacombe and Wallasey, and places like that's the boundary. I think people are absolutely made up with it. So I look at that. Paul says, "Yes, Frank, I know what you mean. Thanks for the clarifying that. Pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Any more questions? And if I can answer them, I will. I'll certainly answer them. And isn't it strange, though, the way one of the streets, actually, where I was asked was Rodney Street.
Yeah.
Rodney Street. And Rodney Street, it was called Bridges Street, and it was named after the admiral, the British admiral. Anyway, in 1782, he had to go and fight the French in St. Lucia, the West Indies, and he defeated the French. So everyone was made up, to defeat the French, And when he got back, they named that street after him, Rodney. He became a lord, you see, so they gave him the title Rodney.
Did he live there at any point? No.
No. And yet, do you know the very first house?
Yeah.
I love this. And the very first house that was built and who lived in it was the people reckon that he was the greatest of all Liverpudlians, and that was William Roscoe.
Wow.
The very first house built, and one of Liverpool's greatest architects, and his son, but was John Foster Sr., and he designed the outlet. He designed the outlet of Rodney Street. And as I said, the very first house is, if you're walking towards the Anglican Cathedral, for example, it's on your left. It's on your left.
Oh, we'll have to do that summer, Frank.
And you know what? I'd love it. If Laney could drive us up, if I'm all right, like,
Yeah.
if Laney could drive us up there, I'll show you something there that people go, didn't realise that. And I can't tell you now, I really can't, because you wouldn't know anything about it in Rodney Street. And it's incredible, and it's so easy. You know, you go, wow, yeah, you know.
Wow.
It's just one of those things that grabs the attention, shall I say.
Well, I think that is so fitting that Willie Roscoe was the first
Yes,
neighbour on the block.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know that he nearly went bankrupt.
Yeah.
He nearly went bankrupt. And what a man he was. What he gave to Liverpool.
Yeah.
I love philanthropy. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, all I was going to say, just to coincide with what you're saying then, I believe that's where the Athenaeum Club came in part, because he did not want to be seen as owing anyone anything.
No.
I think it was to do with the banking,
Yeah,
and
it was.
he vowed that anyone who's lost money, he would make it his business to make that money up again. And he sold possessions, sold his homes, sold everything he'd collected. And that in itself is quite sad. But what I loved is that his dear friends, would buy the material he was selling, and then they would furnish the likes of the Athenaeum, the library, with his own things, and say to him, you kind of still got them, you know. You've got the money to pay the people who need paying, and then you've got your things.
And what he brought to Liverpool, he brought Italian art.
Oh.
He brought Italian art over. We'd never seen Italian art. And he also, go on.
I will never ever forget. And during one of our chats in recent times, when I did some research on the Royal Academy of Arts, not in London, in Liverpool, he set that up. That was him. And his wonderful Italian artwork, sculptures and things went there, and are still there. We enjoy them after all these years of losing them. You know, he's just.
He's a remarkable man. He's a remarkable liver. That's why they say he's the greatest of all Scousers. And when you look also at what he did, what got him was, exotic plants. And he said, why can't we show the citizens these exotic plants? And he opened up the very first botanical gardens in the entire world in 1801.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. And he opens it, Anthony, he opens up that wonderful thing.
What a vision he had.
Well, I love visionaries, as you know, and he was a great visionary. He really was. We'll have a quick break, and I'll see you after the break, and we'll have a little go at the Civil War.
Civil War, yeah.
And what impact it had on all the Scousers.
I'm with you, boss.
Here we are, on the site of the castle. Obviously it's gone, went centuries ago, 1723 to be precise. But the plaque tells you it's all about the site. Is this the castle wall? No, it's FM Simpson's Victoria Monument, and it's been here since 1906. But when you look around the actual site, you will find clues about the castle, like the Castle Moat House and Lower Castle Street. Queen Victoria doesn't look very happy, does she? She's been here for over 100 years. I wonder if she's been waiting for a bus in that time. But beneath her feet lies fantastic history. William de Ferrers built the castle in 1235, but in 1644 Prince Rupert laid siege to the Liverpool castle from Everton. There were four major families in Liverpool: the Moores, the Norrises, the Stanleys, the Molyneux. And it was the Moores who were the Roundheads. They had taken the parliamentary course. But when he seen a three-pronged attack by Prince Rupert from Everton and Old Hall Street, he made a cowardly getaway and he took his troops with him. Unfortunately, he left 360 citizens to fend for themselves. They were slaughtered by Rupert's troops, and unfortunately the royalists that garrisoned the castle from then on, but they only garrisoned it for 3 months because the castle changed hands 3 times. And with that cowardly getaway, the Moors were never forgiven. The siege of the castle by Rupert lasted 18 days, but he also lost 2,000 men and used up all his gunpowder. And from here, Liverpool Castle, he went up to Marston Moor for another famous battle. But there is another castle, Rupert Castle, and the blue half of the city, the football fans would know this very well. So I want you to come with me to Everton. We've just been talking about the real Liverpool Castle. Here in Everton is Prince Rupert's Castle, but it's a myth. It was built in 1787 and it was just used for a lock-up. And as you can see for yourself, it's a little turret, not a castle. When I say a lock-up, it wasn't for possessions like gold or silver or anything like that. It was a lock-up for the bad people of the time, drunks, people who stole, and especially it was used as a holding cell for condemned men, or women for that matter, who went up to the gibbet in London Road, and that's where they swung. This structure is over 200 years old, and as you can see, it's still finely maintained. After all, it's a part of the city's heritage. And for the Evertonians, it's used as their emblem on their football strip. I don't think anybody's in here at the moment, but I tell you what, I could think of a few people today who could put in there. Could you? Look at the fantastic view. No wonder Prince Rupert used this to look down at the castle.
How about that? Castle.
I've heard you talk about that so many times, but what was lovely to see the reenactments in the middle of that was great. Brings it to life, yeah.
It does bring it to life, and that's what I mean in your profession about art. You know, art back in the day, it brought everything to life. And each battle, for example, when, let's just pick 15, 1556, let's just pick that year. And you had the English going over to Ireland. You had the English. And when you have like invasions or whatever, back in the day, I just picked that 1566, you always had a scribe, a writer, to see what's going on, and also an artist. That's why you've got images of like the Civil War, for example, because you had artists on the day. That's why you've got the likes of the death of Nelson on a ship. You've got the death of Nelson, and you had an artist, just painted it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But then you had other copies of it, who weren't there.
And then that stayed with us right the way through to almost our modern times.
Modern times.
Second World War.
First World War, Second World War.
Were commissioned.
Do you know what, Andy? When you mentioned about the First World War there, what's always resonated with me now, even when you mentioned it, just came to me. And I don't think it's hardly shown anymore. But you had the cavalry. Now, our older generals, are looking at these plans for the First World War.
Yeah.
They had cavalry, and what they were actually looking at was during the Napoleonic Wars, especially at Waterloo, and they really thought that this war would be fought like Waterloo, if you know what I mean, fighting Napoleon. And there's a footage of a film where you see it was shocking, and I was shocked at it. And First World War, and it was a proper footage. It wasn't like from a film or anything. It was proper footage, and you see these cavalry, the soldiers on the horses coming over across, like wherever they were crossing, and then all of a sudden shells were coming over, and it was shocking. They were just getting blown up, just like that, just like that, and they were blown up. They were blown to pieces, and that was real life footage, and it shocked me. I didn't think that they could ever film things like that, but they did. That cameraman, and it's just one of those things where you've got people like older generals who were thinking like 100 years before.
Totally.
Yeah. Because the likes of the First World War was the very first modern warfare. Because you had to machine guns, to grenades, to shells, you had everything, rather than the cannon, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was the first modern warfare.
Wow. I mean, that reminds me of what I've heard and read and listened to you talk about the first hours of the Somme, something like that, and they didn't really have a clue what they were getting into.
No. And we had the Liverpool Pals that was formed by Lord Derby, and there was a knock-on effect throughout the country, by their pals. So we had the Liverpool Pals. And on the 1st of July 1916, the first Battle of Ypres, the Liverpool Pals were wiped out in the first 2 hours. 60,000 casual. Think about Anfield. 60,000 people could fit in there today. 60,000. And they've gone within 2 hours. It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. And that's the way people have to think about capacity, scale, everything. And the first 2 hours of the first Battle of Ypres, 60,000 within the day of casualties. But anyway, you know, these particular, there's Christopher. Hi, Frank and Anthony and everyone. Like and subscribe, please. Thank you there, Christopher.
Thank you, sir.
I never ask, you know, and I should really. I should ask. It's one of those things that, you know, when you look at wars, you and I are pacifists, to be honest, and you just look at them, and it's waste of death. It's a waste. It's just the death is a waste of life. I should have mentioned a waste of life, young lives, and they're the only people who go to these wars. And it's mostly working class people. And they go to wars. And it's just like the Civil War, the English Civil War. And Liverpool hardly gets mentioned. Hardly mentioned. And I've always asked the question, why? Why do we hardly ever get mentioned? And we hardly ever get mentioned as the most bombed city outside London in the Second World War. We hardly get mentioned. And I wonder, you know, what's wrong with these historians? Why don't they ever mention them? And when you go back to the impact of the English Civil War on Liverpool, it was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. I can go back to 1349 to 1359. And within that period, Liverpool, there was the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
And it wiped out half of the population of Liverpool. But because we had wide streets and the prevailing wind coming off the Mersey, you know, we had wide streets in Liverpool. Because when you go around at the time, you know, you're talking like the 1300s. When you go around the country at the time, especially like, say, like London, for example, the streets were so narrow.
Yeah.
And nothing could get through, like wind or anything. So all these diseases, you know, were just lingering, if you know what I mean. They were just lingering, they couldn't be swept away.
Yeah.
And the prevailing winds, as I said, in Liverpool, because of the wideness of the streets, blew away the pestilence. And that's why only, I know I'm saying only half of these things. And when you come forward, as I said, when you come forward to the Civil War, the likes of the bubonic plague it wasn't man-made, if you know what I mean. I know that sounds strange, but it wasn't man-made. So it just happened, and it took away lives. But when you leap forward to the English Civil War, that was man-made. That was man-made. and countless of lives were lost. Now let's talk about Liverpool here. And I think during the break, um, they seen what I was talking about. Because when the siege happened with Prince Rupert, you've got to say, Prince Rupert was saying, lay down your arms. You're surrounded. And they wouldn't lay down their arms. And when you look at camp, when you look at Everton, for example, that was the highest ground, Everton, looking down at the castle. But he really couldn't view, this is Rupert, he really couldn't view the castle, and get a clear view of what was going to happen. And he went along from there because of all the trees. There was loads of trees. So anyway, he moved his troops from the highest point in Everton. You know the pub, the Campfield, by any chance? Well, there's a school there now as well.
Yeah.
But I used to teach there, funny enough. I used to do some night school there. And that's where they camped, and that's why it's called the Campfield, because of Rupert's troops camping there. So we moved along to Lower Hill, and that's where he viewed the castle, because there was hardly any trees. What there was beautiful, wildflowers.
Yeah.
Wildflowers. That spread from like the likes of Will to Mount Pleasant. That's why Mount Pleasant was called Mount Pleasant, simply because of that. The beauty of these wildflowers.
Wow.
Mount Pleasant. Because it was on a hill, as we know today. It's
fantastic that those names are stuck.
Yeah.
For hundreds of years.
So when you look at the view where the old Royal is, for example, that's where they viewed it, Lowell, and they viewed the castle. He was only here 18 days, Rupert, 18 days, and the myth with the the Everton emblem and the turret in Everton, we built that.
Yeah.
He called it Rupert's Castle. They still do today, Rupert's Castle. Well, Rupert was here between May and June 1644, and the turret was built in 1787. You see, so you're going over a century, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
When it was built, but it's it's a nice myth. It's not a myth like St. George's Hall, for example, being built back to float.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely nonsensical. Few myths that are nonsensical.
It's still shocking that things like that get through, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that no one says, no, behave yourself. That's not.
Yeah. No, that's true. And when you look at what the impact was going to be on Liverpool, like as I said in the piece of film, there was like 350 citizens in Liverpool. And who held the castle was Colonel Moore. Now, Colonel Moore, he held the castle, and he was a parliamentarian. He was a parliamentarian, and he said to don't forget that, like, people, all the citizens couldn't fit into the castle, but some were there, lots were there. But there was also, like ordinary citizens around. We were parliamentarian. The majority of people were parliamentarian, yeah. Out of the four families, it was only the Moores who were parliamentarian. The likes of the Norrises, the Molyneux, and the Stanleys, they were all confirmed royalists. So when Rupert got there, viewed the castle, and he was using up all his gunpowder. So he thought, he said, we've got to think here, we've got to plan this. So he did. And what it was like what the Germans did with their panzer divisions in the Second World War, which was very successful, by the way. And so what he did a pincer movement. He did a pincer movement. He had one going straight down. So like from St. George's Church, for example, in Everton, not where the campfield is, St. George's Church, and he had them going straight down. Then he had others going, other troops going down the left-hand side, which is around Lowell, Mount Pleasant, for example, there, and the other going around where Castle Street is.
Yeah.
That way, so it was a pincer division movement.
Yeah.
Middle, two ends. So, the troops, the Liverpool troops, didn't know what to do. And what was snidey as well, to use the terminology, snidey, was Rupert himself. Now, battles, as Shakespeare says, are won and lost in a day. Because when it became nightfall, fighting just stopped. Because they couldn't see each other. See what I mean? They couldn't see each other. So they stopped and waited until the next morning. And that's why the old saying comes, battles are won and lost in a day, which they were. Because I'm not sure just here in this country, but other countries that were in battles, and they said, see you tomorrow, yeah, okay. And, some armies used to say, I'll sod this, I'm going home, and just leave. Especially like the people with picks, if you know what I mean, fighting for the rich farmer, the lords of the land.
Yeah.
So they used to just go home, and the other lords, he's won that battle simply because there was no one to fight at all, because the other army went home. So anyway, what you had this, it was shocking really. You had this pincer movement, but he did it in the night. Now Moore's got the information that these were coming during the night. They were coming, Rupert's troops. So we made a getaway. He had a ship already there on the Mersey, and he said, "Come on, lads, let's get off." And he did. He made a cowardly escape. He got off. He went to the Isle of Man, actually. He sailed to the Isle of Man, but he left. He left the citizens to fend for themselves, and they were slaughtered.
Oh.
Every one of them was slaughtered. And that's like, they were never forgiven, the Moors, after that. They were never forgiven. Because where you have Tithe Barn Street, that was known as Moore Street. Moore Street was known as that. And they just went to scrub the name out. Moore Street. And after the Royalists had taken it in June, the castle that is, when it was retaken by the parliamentarians in the November, that was taken in the June, in the November, it was retaken by the parliamentarians because they just got off. The Royalists just got off. They were defeated. Anyway, that's when the name Moore Street was scrubbed out. And they used to pay tithes, taxes in this big barn that belonged to the Moors. So it was more or less, believe it or not, an insult to the Moors. So they renamed it Tithe Taxes Barn, where they were paid, Street, Tithe Barn Street. And it was more or less an insult there to the Moors to say, we paid our taxes in that barn. So it was renamed so that people would never forget what they were actually doing and paying taxes to the Moors who got off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you see the way wars, and especially like in Liverpool, and seems to have been forgotten, innocent lives. And yet, when the Royalists got off from here, and they battled from here, and Rupert using up all his gunpowder, and he lost 2,000 men, 2,000. That's why he was slaughtered, the rest, the 350 citizens, because he killed 2,000 men belonging to Rupert.
Yeah.
Well, by the time he got off, and don't forget, in those days, there was no trains or anything. He had to walk there.
Yeah.
Except the people who had the horses. They could be in carts and whatever and sit on the horses and get them there. And they got to a place called Marston Moor, which is in York. So Marston Moor, and that's where the other fella, Charles I, surrendered himself to the Scots because he was advised, get to Scotland, surrender yourself there. And he said, okay. And he was, led up there, he surrendered himself to the Scots. Now, here's the thing, Anthony. That particular battle here, the siege of the castle, and the waste of 2,000 men, all the gunpowder used up, the troops were bloodied, tired, and bedraggled by the ones that were living and wounded, by the way. So they made their way up to Marston Moor, and they seen it. It gave the parliamentarians a lift. They went, look at this lot. Because there was, it was very gentlemanly. You had a battle the next day, and that's how they were defeated. Yet it's never mentioned.
That is just shocking.
It's never mentioned.
That loss was because they got a good hiding when they came to Liverpool, and had they not,
it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. And that's the sad thing about the history of Liverpool. It gets mentioned. Ever gets mentioned. I don't know why it never gets mentioned, in all honesty. And I keep saying this, and people have heard me saying this before. I picked a book up and it was that thick. And it was about the May Blitz. The May Blitz. And when I looked through, and I looked at it, I said, where's Liverpool? So I went through the index, and there's Liverpool. And there was like 2 pages. There was like pictures on that side, pictures on this side, and on the other page, pictures on that side, pictures on that. But not many pictures, just a couple of pictures on each side. And that was Liverpool's bombing. That was it. That was the May Blitz in Liverpool. Never gets mentioned. The most bombed city outside London. Boom. The most bombed town. Never gets mentioned. And you wonder why. And I'm still wondering why.
I go through phases like yourself, and like our all lovely chat who've gone through it. And there's times where you get very angry about it and stuff. I'd like to think it's because Liverpool stands up for itself and it won't tolerate snides, as you said before, or any of that. So it's like, don't mess with them.
Yeah. Got some pictures again, as I said. These lads. Look, now, someone was there doing these.
Yeah.
Quick sketches and then painted.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Look at that. And that's Liverpool. And where you see, like, the castle, and right at the top, that's the beacon. That's Everton Beacon. That's from Roman times, by the way. That's from Roman times, because the Romans built that beginning, and then it was built on, during like the Spanish Armada and fighting the French. If anyone came down the Mersey, the French or the Spanish or whoever we were fighting at the time, that would have been lit. That was a beacon to tell the people of Liverpool that the French or the Spanish were coming, or any other invader.
Yeah. But as you described before, Frank, with Rupert's tactics, split the regiments into three, which sounds very Romanesque, very Roman army, strategic.
Yeah.
And that was the great gift of Napoleon, as we know years later, is that thought process.
I love it where you've got the beacon up there, and that's where all the trees came down. The trees came down because Cromwell said to the people of Liverpool, wood was a very fine commodity. Everything was built in wood, as you know, from ships and everything else. So it was a very fine commodity to have. And he said to the people, of Liverpool, chop the trees down, they're yours. Do whatever you want with them. And Liverpool built, how can I say this? Like battlements out of this wood as well. Besides homes, they built battlements just in case they were going to be invaded again. That's the way it was. That's the way it was. But I think that's a cracking little picture there. When you've got a castle, you've got a battlement. With the battery as well, which is by St Nick's Church, by the way. And also what you've got next to St Nick's Church on the left is the tower building, the first tower building.
Yeah.
And it was built around 1301. Absolutely amazing. And what people tend to forget as well, that Liverpool was a paved town. It wasn't like flags that we see today, but it was stone.
Yeah.
It was paved around the streets. And Liverpool became the very first paved town. And that was in 1566. No, the first stone township, of 1566, after the Great Storm. But around 1301, when the tower, was being built approximately, you had the likes of Lord Molyneux saying, what do we do with all this brick that's left over? I'll tell you what, let's build something around the tower so that our feet will keep dry. And that was it. And I went into the town, and Liverpool became the very first paved town. And it's recorded, it's documented by a fellow named Thomas Leland, who was the librarian and antiquary of King Henry VIII.
Wow.
So it's well documented. You see, I think these great pictures,
Yeah.
and there's the, look, as you see there, Anthony, you've got royalists and parliamentarians. It's fantastic. And there's the plan there. Look, can you see those green things? Lines. They're the battlements. They are the battlements of wood to keep invading their people out of Liverpool. Battlements. And that's what they did. That's what Cromwell said, you can have the wood, do what you want with them. And we built battlements. And that's where, if you see the battlements there, that's where the pincer movement came. So the people knew at the time, well, no one will be coming that way in the middle. No one will be coming at the sides either. Fantastic.
Wow.
I've got this picture in colour. It's brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. And that's the ending of the... people don't realise why... People do not realise why the war started. They might have some idea. And when you think about the Civil War, and it was all through Maria Andrietta, who was the Queen of Charles I. Now, right from the Reformation, and priests, were being executed left, right, and centre, and Catholics being persecuted right through, whether you're a wealthy Catholic or not, you were persecuted for taxes and everything else. And if you didn't, to send your children, your offspring to university or whatever to be educated, that child was after to change his allegiance from his faith to the protesters, faith, which became Protestant protest, against Rome. And if you didn't, you weren't educated. So it's things like that. So why did it start? Because Henrietta had a priest, her own priest, who used to say mass within, where the king lived. And there used to be deputations going up from Parliament to the king to talk over, lots of things and, all matters of commerce and whatever, what's going on in the country and taxes and everything else. So that's what was happening, and they used to go and they used to see Henrietta, at a mass. And you see the king, just standing in the background.
Yeah.
And he said, we can't have this. Catholicism's coming back and we don't want this. So he says, okay. So they had a big debate, and it was called the Long Parliament. And it was from 1639 to 1641. And that was known as the Long Parliament, 2 years. And it was debating about the monarchy. So they decided to do away with the monarchy, have a republic, and the royalists who were on that, they can't do that. He's our king, he's the anointed one. So the Civil War started. And that was simple as that. Again, over religion. Shows you, doesn't it?
Charlie lost his head.
Yeah, he did. He was a very brave man, and it's actually written down, by the scribes that he was a very brave man. And so were the people who was also being beheaded. horrible, just horrible. It really was horrible. You'd even go back to Henry VIII, with the likes of Anne Boleyn, and she was very brave going to her.
Yeah.
Just horrible times. He was horrible, Henry.
Yeah.
A horrible fella.
He was psychopathic, wasn't he? So,
Yeah.
you like some leaders we have in the world now, you can't really be friends with or reason with
No.
A psychopath.
No.
Because they'll just flit.
No, you can't reason with psychopaths. It's impossible to reason with. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. That's the way the world revolves. You've got to go right through time. You even can go back to the before the Romans came into England, long before. You had all these different tribes, and these were all dissidents from the Roman period, from the likes of Spain, France, Germany, Belgium. You had them all. And once they came over to the country, to England, they started making, if there's a group of, say, like Belgians, you're all going to stick together.
Yeah.
And they became the Belgians. The Belgians. They became them, so they had a group. You had the likes of French coming over.
Yeah.
And they became the Parisi. So you had the Regni as well. You had all these different tribes up and down the country.
Well,
but they were always war and faction. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I would totally agree with what you're saying is absolutely right, Frank. And that underlines this sense of bizarreness when you see someone putting something through a shop window saying, "I'm British, this is our land."
Yeah.
Really? You're not. You're from all parts of the world. We're all immigrants. From my understanding, the only true sons and daughters of this soil are the Celts, the Irish,
yeah,
the Scottish,
yeah,
and the Northerners.
Yeah.
Everything else in the country is a free-for-all.
Mongrel race, you mean?
Yeah.
Like the Americans, you won't like what I'm going to say. The Americans are a mongrel race. The ones in power are a mongrel race. I had to go to the Aussie today. Not the Aussie. I had to go and get some bloods done, and there was a Chinese lady who was taking me bloods, and she was lovely. I was talking to her, and she was telling me about her grandmother in China.
Yeah.
Grandmother. And, she was chatting, and she said, "Are you political?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, what do you think of the Americans?" And I knew what she was getting at, because of China.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm a historian." And I said to her, when you actually look at what America does, I said, the major axis of evil. I said, one is Russia. The other one is North Korea. The other one is Iran, and the other one is China. And I say to people, what's Russia ever done to me? What's any Russian ever done to me? And I say, they've done nothing to me. And I say, well, what's these North Koreans ever done to me? Never done anything to me. I say about the Iranians, what's the Iranians ever done to me? Iranians have never done anything. And Chinese, what have they ever done to me? What have they ever done to anybody? What's the Iranians done to anybody?
Yeah.
What's the Russians ever done to anybody? What's the North Koreans ever done to anybody? And so they're the axis of evil. So the likes of like other Western countries and globalists, to be honest, they're all looking at it going, oh yeah, they must be bad because America has said it. America has said it.
Yeah.
So we have to follow America. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
America, if there's any wars going on, America is involved.
Yeah.
Always been involved. I said, so the Chinese, I said, it's an economic war. I said, and just before I came out to see you, I said, the tariffs that Trump has put around to giving everybody tariffs, this is America for you. So these tariffs, I said, it's not just like 25% or 35%. I said, when you look at China, it's 104%.
I know. He's using it as a weapon.
Oh, all the time. Now what he's doing, and I think it's wrong of him, he's actually putting tariffs. Now I was talking to our Francine today. She took me up to the, to get my bloods done. And anyway, talking about Trump and his tariffs. And she said, well, what do we get off America, Dad? I said, we get a lot. I said, what does the baby like, Sophia? I said, she always goes somewhere to get chicken nuggets. She said, McDonald's. I said, well, there you go. I said, not just McDonald's, you've got the KFC. I said, and we do get a lot of food from America. We do get a lot of food. The point is, Francine, I said, the biggest commodity coming into this country is the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutical, that's keeping me alive today because I have to take these bloody tablets. I said, they're keeping me alive today. I said, so it's the pharmaceuticals. Now, when she left, I'm looking at Trump later on, and he's putting a lot of tariffs, and it's just come out, on pharmaceuticals. And there's a method behind that madness, and do you know what it is, Anthony? I'm telling you now. Anthony,
other than insanity.
Go on.
Other than it's insanity, which is becoming more and more obvious.
I'll tell you what it is.
Yeah.
It's a privatised and national level. I'm telling you now. Because they'll turn around and go, the government, we can't afford this. You'll have to pay for everything. Therefore, if you go to the doctors, you'll have to pay to go to the doctors. That's coming. That's coming. America, for years, not just Trump, for years, have been wanting to privatise the national level.
Yeah.
Because they're buying things.
Well, that's a similar observation to Greenland.
Oh, of course.
looks after their people and have their national health.
Yeah.
He does
Yeah.
not. It's not.
Anywhere. China.
The one good
China.
thing. One good thing I see in this, a little bit of a white, is that even American companies, and you mentioned a couple, the food industries, McDonald's and the like, they have to have European bases because for European law, there's a lot of food stuff which is not um, passable in
No.
the UK and
No.
in Germany and in Belgium and the
Yeah.
like. So it's um, it's sourced from Europe, the meats, the cheeses, the whatever goes with it. And the one that I kind of I took time to readdress today is his fixation with China at the moment, and he's loaded the tariff and loaded the tariff and loaded the tariff. One of the, if not the biggest selling phone in the world is an Apple iPhone,
Yeah.
which is not made in America.
No.
It's made under license in China.
Yeah.
So the very people in America who flock in their millions to buy the iPhone are now snookered because what was nearly £1,000 for the phone is now going to be 2.5 or whatever thousand, and they're not going to sell. So
No.
that's an industry that's going to wobble
Exactly. Exactly. It's as simple as that, actually, because when you actually look at the way America, they cornered the market in the First World War, and then the dollar.
Yeah,
They plowed in the dollar into Germany, of all places.
yeah,
They plowed it in. So their currency became nothing. It
yeah,
became nothing. And that's the way it was all over Europe. They plowed it in. If you want to buy something off us, because everybody being at war, but
yeah,
you'd have to pay with the dollar. So we had to buy everything with the dollar. They wouldn't accept a pound. They wouldn't accept the French franc. They wouldn't accept the likes of the leader of Italy. It's everything. And that's how they cornered the market with the dollar. Now
this
they can put sanctions on anybody
this
through the
goes back
dollar.
to Charles and the likes.
It's just, it's
It's
just,
you know what? I am so glad we don't have any money.
yeah,
We
it's
we can't worry about losing it. You know,
no, no, and it's just,
I'm
look,
so you and I.
America terrorizes people with
Yes,
sanctions. He terrorizes, he's terrorizing now with all the tariffs that's going on.
yeah,
And I was made up with Trump coming in. I was saying, oh, this is great, this, with Trump. And a man of peace. It was a big con. It's not a man of peace. And you can only see what's going on in the world today. All because of America.
yeah, yeah.
All because of America. And, what he wants to bomb. He wants to bomb Iran. What's fucking Iran done? It's shocking, isn't it?
Well, he's trying to force them not to have any weaponry, certainly not
Because,
nuclear weaponry. Why?
yeah,
If
because of Israel.
yeah,
That's why.
I'm gonna pick a fight with you or with someone, and I'm saying, you haven't got a piece of wood in your hand, have you?
Mhm.
Well, you're picking the fight, so does it matter?
Exactly.
I'll wallop you, and
Well,
that's
well, I've
what.
always said,
Yeah,
for years, if anyone's got nuclear weapons, why can't other countries, because whoever's got a nuclear weapon can threaten anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone.
I
But
mean,
that's where, go on.
it's just obviously mine, and I know yours too, is that no country should have nuclear weapons. What are we talking about?
No. No.
Countries should be planning warfare on another country to see what you've got your own. Look after your own people. Make sure your children are fed, educated. No, don't be.
But that's why you're at it as a disarmament, don't make more bombs and everything else. But the Americans broke it with Russia, broke that treaty with Russia.
Yeah.
And it's just nonsensical. Everyone was living in peace, except America going into different places and causing wars and whatever, especially in the Middle East, to destabilize it.
Yeah.
And they succeeded.
Yeah.
They succeeded. And why Gaddafi, the likes of Muammar Gaddafi, he was, all the propaganda that came out about that man.
Yeah.
Now, Gaddafi, he always lived in a tent because he was born in a tent. And, the way his citizens were, the Libyans. And what had happened was, he said, until every Libyan has a home, I'm going to live in the tent. And anyone who was getting married, and he gave them a bounty and he gave them a home. Any Libyan getting married. And he was so good to his people. He had free petrol and everything. It was incredible what he did for them. And then he said, I don't want to, I want gold. I don't want dollar. I don't want to, I'm not interested in dollar. For our oil, America didn't like that. So they got rid of it. And the British didn't like it either. It's shocking what we do. And with the Americans, it's shocking. And as I said, America blackmail everybody. And I mean everybody. The propaganda is absolutely amazing. Well, it's not propaganda anymore. It's just pure, blatant lies. Well, and on that note, Anthony, I'm going to it. But what I want to, I always keep forgetting, Jason. Like this thing behind, not the castle. Someone asked the other week about, the map that's underneath me, side of me, and above me.
Yeah.
It's a back of map. We have done it before, by the way.
Yeah.
Remember someone asked last week, I think, said, what's that map?
Yeah. And we thought it was the castle, but the map we zoomed to an area. And fantastic. Yeah.
So I said to him, well, what I'll do, I'll get Jason to put us up and we'll go around what Liverpool was like going in, what that painting is all about. So I'm going to ask Jason for next week to do that map.
Yeah.
And we'll go around, zoom in and,
yeah,
for that particular person who asked.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah. I'd love that, yeah.
Okay, so we'll do that next week, eh?
Yeah.
But I think loads of them are watching the Champions League. That's where we come unstuck with things, the Champions League.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, we've got people watching. And Anthony, once again, thank you so much.
Frank, thank you so much. I've learned so much. I thought I knew a little bit about that from what you talked about before, but that's really fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
But it was just like a one-off thing, wasn't it? Talking about certain things and that. And I'll just finish off with these fellas. When I got those questions, about the streets and that.
Yeah.
And so I'll finish them off next week for you.
Yeah.
For the rest of the people there. And as Christopher says, night Frank and Anthony and Jason, great again. Isn't that lovely?
Thanks.
And it's little comments like that make it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
It does, Anthony. You know that and I know that. And it's just for me to a big thank you to you, as usual, for keeping me company. I just want to tell the people about tomorrow night. I've got the pod tomorrow about football pod.
Yeah.
So we've got that Francine's joining me tomorrow night.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, she hasn't been on for a while, has she? I used to, yeah. I've enjoyed watching Dipping Into Your Live.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. If we did happen to have a swear box, we could match any tariff in the world.
Do you know what? I won't be able to swear tomorrow. And it's but anyway, she's joining me tomorrow night, and we'll see what's going on.
I will tune in. We will.
Should be fun, Anthony. It should be fun, to be honest with Francine. It's surprising what she knows about football, and she gets on the bleeding nerves. Can't get away with it. But anyway, she's with me.
She gets a bit from her dad, and then she's got her own,
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And on the Friday, I've got my current affairs, which we touched on just before.
Yeah.
On what's going on, especially with tariffs and America. What's going on in Ukraine? What's going on with China? Hopefully that Iran thing doesn't get bombed, because, well, I'll be talking all about that. And the Iranians are not stupid people. They've got a deterrent as well. So I'll be talking all about that. And on the current affairs on Friday night. On Saturday morning, it's the film and TV review. And I've got some great films to be talking about, actually.
New ones? Or
yeah.
Classic?
Yeah. There's a couple of old ones as well. And Christopher says, Frank will have to pay off the national debt from one watch along if he has a swear box.
That's what I say, yeah. Yeah.
When I brought Sophia, I was made up, when Sophia came to match with me last year, I've seen it like a match now with all the grandchildren, the three of them. And I was made up that Sophia came along, little red, and she said to me, Granddad, I said, what? She said, what are you shouting for? I said, that's what you do. She said, but no one else is, because we were in the main stand, you know what I mean? Everyone was quiet. I never swore, I said, but you shout at the referee, She said, what for? I said, I don't know. You just shout at him. Try to explain. But anyway, thanks for that, Christopher. Thank you. You know what I mean? Pay the national debt off. So, Anthony, once again, thank you. I'll see you next week. Hopefully, you'll comment some other night.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I tell you, I've watched a couple of films on YouTube, Anthony.
Okay.
And they're good, They're good. They're really good. And I'll be talking about them. I'll be talking about well, it's controversial, actually, what I'll be talking about, latest film. And it's wrong, in my opinion. But that's for Saturday morning. And I just want to thank Jason for the the wonderful setup and everything else as usual. I
Yeah.
want to thank Gap Painting Services for sponsoring the Frank Carlyle Show. Please get them in. All the numbers are there, in the description. Just get them in. Please don't struggle. Please. They're all time saved and fully insured. Just get them in. And also, the most important people I want to thank are the people who've been commenting tonight.
Yeah.
The people who've been commenting, they're the most important people. Because without them, Anthony, as you know, there'd be no Frank Carlyle Show. And there'd be no Anthony Brown sitting there. And
No, we'd be sitting on a park bench with a square box.
Especially after the game. All right, Anthony, thank you, mate. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night. Okay?
Yeah.
On the
We'll
show.
tune in. Yeah.
And thank you all there. Thank you for keeping Anthony and myself company. Thank you. See you some of you tomorrow night. Thank you. Bye now. Bye.
Brilliant.